Hello everyone. Today I will tell you a true horror story from a Japanese netizen. Fern went on vacation every year. One of our relatives had a villa and we used to travel across the country every summer and spend time there. It was great. I made lots of great memories with my family there. But I want to share a disturbing experience I had one night. I was about 10 or 11 when this happened. The villa was pretty deep in the mountains. There was no electricity and there weren't too many other people in the area. It was a great place to spend a relaxing summer. On the fourth day of our annual stay, my parents decided that they wanted to go to karaoke. I didn't want to because I was so tired from hiking in the mountains. They said that I could get food there, and that won me over. The karaoke place was literally in the middle of a field halfway down the mountain pass. I guess that we were there for about 2 hours or so. I looked at the clock and it said it was 11 p.m. I was really wrestling with my own rousiness. Now the karaoke room was really loud. We had our own private room, so it was just my family in there. My dad saw how tired I was and I guess he was kind of annoyed at my complaining. He said, "Why didn't you go sleep in the car?" I thought that wouldn't be a bad idea. So he gave me the keys and I headed back to the car park alone. It was really dark out there and I remember the sound of crickets chirping in the distance. I got in the car and all of a sudden I didn't feel sleepy anymore. I felt strangely awake. Since I was no longer drowsy, I got bored pretty quickly. So I picked up the flashlight we had in the car. I was absent-mindedly shining it all around, and I aimed it at this other car, which was parked in the car park. It was right next to our family car. I don't know how. I didn't notice it before. I flicked the flashlight over the windows and I noticed a figure in the car. I thought that it would be rude to shine the light in that person's eyes. So I moved the flashlight off the car and then I just turned it off. I thought that had annoyed them. So I did what any kid would do to try and avoid trouble in my situation. I pretended to be asleep. Through half-closed eyes, I noticed that the person in the car was looking my way. I couldn't make out their face, but I knew they were looking at me. It made me nervous. Something was off. I realized that the person in the car next to us hadn't moved for a while. It was like a mannequin was sat in the car. I was sure that it was a person. Well, it looked like a human in the car. It didn't seem like my eyes were playing tricks on me. I felt a chill on my back. I really didn't like it in the car anymore. I made the decision to leave until the moment I felt like I needed to get out of there. The person in the car hadn't moved a muscle. But as soon as I decided to go, the figure slowly began to turn to face me more directly, just the person's head, not their body. I was unable to move. It was like I was glued to the spot. Since I had been sat in the car for a while, my eyes had grown accustomed to the dark. I could now begin to make out the contours of the person in the car beside me. The head turned very slowly. The tension was unbearable as I still couldn't move. When the head turned about halfway towards me, I felt my spine stiffen like ice. The face of that person in the car was in a keloid state. The face was ruined with red rosque eyes, scars so enlarged that they engulfed the features of the face. I couldn't make out the eyes or the nose. I focused every ounce of my energy into running, but I still couldn't move. Sweat was teeming down my forehead. Tears began to well in the corner of my eyes, yet I could not free myself. Now that I'm older, the only thing that I can describe that feeling is a sleep paralysis. Yet I was wide awake. At one point I was convinced I was dreaming. I kept repeating in my mind, "Wake up, wake up," but I couldn't. I couldn't wake up because I wasn't asleep, and this was really happening. I managed to close my eyes and I kept them as tightly shut as I could. I don't know how long passed, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and then I opened my eyes. I saw that scarred face staring right at me. I have no memory of that night, save for that reddened face peering at me. I was shaken awake by my dad. I told him what happened and he suspected that I just had a nightmare. He didn't seem all that interested. I was convinced that it was real, though I didn't let it go. I made a bit of a scene in the car park. It was very traumatizing for me. I must have been in a state because my mother went back to the karaoke place to ask if there was anyone in the car park earlier. A few moments later, the owner of the place came out with my mother. She looked concerned and she knelt beside the car and asked me very cautiously, what did the person look like? I guessed that the owner of the place wanted to make sure that there was no troublemakers in the area. I felt the pressure as the adults awaited my answer. I said that there was a person in the car next to our car and they were staring at me. The car had since gone, so we couldn't establish who the owner was. They asked me to describe the person. When I said that they had terrible red scars all over their face and they were sat in the car next to ours, I was absorbed in giving as much detail as I possibly could. I barely noticed that the owner of the karaoke place was crying. She paused and cleared her throat and spoke in a weak voice. She took her own life right in this car park. She set her car alight and sat in there. For years ago we were all in stunned silence. She felt comfortable speaking about what had happened. She went on to tell us that her daughter had been relentlessly bullied at school. It had gone on for years and she had hid it from her family to her. Nothing could be done about the bullying, so she decided to take a different, fatal course of action. I was so sad to hear this. It was crushing. I've never felt such weights of oppressive loneliness. Something she said jogged my memory because I was suddenly able to remember something that happened before I fainted. I remembered that I heard a voice and I would never forget it for as long as I live. I only heard 3 words. 3 words spat forth from the past to the present. And those words were, I hate them. I hope her soul can find peace one day. Whenever I sleep outside of my normal bedroom, like in a hotel or something like that, I hear this strange sound. It almost sounds like someone is sighing or exhaling. It's somewhere in the room, but I can never find out where it's coming from. Sounds like there's someone else sleeping in the room with me. I can hear this noise if the lights are on and I still cannot find the source of the noise. It's really strange. I've tried taking photos and videos with my smartphone, but when I play them back I get nothing. I turn the lights off, squint and wait for my eyes to become adjusted to the darkness, and sometimes I feel like there's something amidst the darkness. I can't be sure, though it feels like there is something in the room with me now and then there's some kind of shape. It's pretty creepy. I get worried whenever I hear the sighing, exhaling noise, and it's become impossible to ignore it. I first noticed it last September, and once I heard it there was no way to unhear it. I travel a lot for work and my company seems to have this wonderful skill where they're able to locate the cheapest and most out-of-the-way hotels that money can buy. I guess maybe sleeping in all these rundown motels and hotels could have created this nervousness, and perhaps I'm imagining things well. That was what I thought until the other night. I heard the same sound at home. The one place I hadn't heard it before. It happened when I came home late from work. I remember I walked past it that night and I was eating it at the kitchen table. My whole family were asleep and my eyes were really dry, so I reached for the eye drops and put some in the eyes. I'm still sat at the kitchen table at this point when I hear that strange sighing sound. I wanted to open my eyes, but since I had just put the drops in, I couldn't open them straight away. So I slowly opened my right eye just a bit and looked around the kitchen and of course, like always, there was nothing there. It was new. Like I'd said, I'd only ever heard it when I was away from home, but that night I heard it in my own. I was annoyed. Now I wanted some answers. I wasn't in a hotel. I was home, so I can investigate as much as I felt like. I looked around the kitchen, but the sound wasn't coming from there. Perhaps the hole no over towards the back door. Perhaps. No, I couldn't find it. I was really straining my ears while searching. I felt like this sound was definitely in the kitchen and I left the room and walked back in to reset and get a fresh perspective. As soon as I re-entered the kitchen, I heard the sound and it sounded like it was coming from somewhere near the refrigerator. The thought that it was just a mechanical noise and I had to many late nights crossed my mind until I heard the sound mixed in with the dull hum of the refrigerator. It's here. I know it's around here. I thought that while I was bending over searching for it, The sound was louder for the first time. It felt like I was getting closer, and with that in mind, I decided to hit the lights to see if it made a difference. Usually I needed some time to allow my eyes to adjust to the darkness, and that's when I felt like I could almost see something. But that night something was different. My left eye could see very clearly from that eye in the dark. I guess because I kept my left eye shut while I was searching around the kitchen, which was interesting. My vision seemed to improve a bit more with my right eye shut too. A moment later I saw the white dots emerge out of the darkness. I quickly realized that these may be the whites of someone's eyes. Then I could see the pupils of the eyes. They were dark and looking directly at me. I gasped in shock. I'd never seen anything like that before. I kept looking. I couldn't stop until my surprise. I could see the figure of someone, the owner of those eyes. It looked as if they were tied up, their limbs clearly bound. Their mouth wasn't really visible. I realized why there was tape on the mouth. The sound I was hearing was the inhalation and exhalation through their nose. I could sense that there was no panic in this person. There was just some aura of hopelessness and acceptance. They were not fighting against their situation. The atmosphere in the darkness of my kitchen was that of pure desolation and surrender. The steady patient exhales and inhales continually. I watched in stunned horror and couldn't move. After a few moments, the figure of the bound person appeared to become blurry and then faded to darkness completely to this day. I have no idea why this person, or perhaps I should say this apparition, appeared to me. I haven't heard the breathing again in my home. I really wish I knew more about the poor soul, and I wonder if I will ever hear it again. Next week I'm going to go on another business trip too, and I'll do the same thing I did last time in an attempt to see the beyond person again. I will use my drops and get accustomed to the darkness. Perhaps I will see them then. I'm not sure. I am both excited and terrified, and if I find anything out, I will let you know. This is a true story about the apartment that I used to live in my company. There are many employee transfers regardless of gender, and there are many assignments for individuals. More than I've experienced in other companies. In this company I have worked in human resources and accounting, but last year I was asked to go and help head up a new branch office in a new town. It was a secondment, which meant that I would be working there for about 3 months or until the project was completed. The company had company-owned accommodations, so I didn't need to find my own place or do any viewings. I was grateful that I didn't need to set any of that up myself. About a month before I moved, I went into our headquarters and was able to take a look at the place I was about to live in. It looked pretty big. I guess that was because it was empty. There were no possessions there. When I got there, I went around the room taking photos of any damage. I'd been stunned for damage I didn't make before. That's another story. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. I had a friend and a coworker help me with the move. I wanted to be the first person through the door, so I went there. Before they arrived with a couple of bits, I brought my luggage upstairs. But this time around I felt something was a little off about the place. I just put it down to some new home jitters. My friends arrived and fortunately I didn't have too much work I could offer them. I didn't have many boxes. It worked out well because, if I remember correctly, one of my friends had his shoes off. After a couple of hours, my boss came over just after noon and we both headed out to get some lunch and to catch up. He was acting a little bit odd that day. He asked me, "Are you sure you feel comfortable in that room?" I know what he was getting at. My boss was really into the paranormal and he would often speak about how his family had the second sight. When he had a few drinks at company parties, I played the game and I asked him if he saw anything in my new apartment. No, I haven't actually, but I will say that there is an atmosphere there which I find more than unpleasant. I didn't feel like talking about that kind of stuff with him. It was only going to spook me out. So I changed the subject and he dropped it. I headed back to my new place and unpacked a few more things. And then I went out. I wanted to check out my new neighborhood and get acclimated to the area. When that was all over, I just headed to bed. You know how moving days are. They're a bit tiring. It was around the 25th of September when this happened. It was a strangely hot and humid night. Blame global warming. Anyway, I woke up for some reason that night. I had sweated so much in my sleep that I felt the need to take a shower. Literally, I couldn't lie there in my pajamas anymore. I don't know. Call me OCD, but I'd never woke up covered in sweat like that anyway. In my groggy state, I stumbled over to the shower. I'm back once again. When I was clean, I noticed something. While heading back to my bed, I looked towards my balcony and I noticed that through the gap in the curtains there was a tall and black shadow. I didn't care that much. I just guessed that it was a shadow cast by a neighbor. I didn't know enough about the place to know where the shadows fell at that stage. The next day was a working day, and since I was new, it was a long day. We didn't finish until after 10 p.m. I was really tired. By the time I got home, I could barely remember the shadow I had seen the night before. About 2 weeks passed since I moved, and eventually I got into the rhythm of my new job and I was able to finish work at a sensible time. Most nights I would be home before 7, which I took as a win. Some nights I would hear this really loud banging noise. It sounded like it was coming from the balcony area. I thought it was probably the person above making some noise. Since I was always tired, I didn't have the energy to give much of it about it. After about 2 months, I was given a Friday off work. I think that was because of the work I had done. I don't know. I didn't say no to it. I didn't really have any plans for it, though I figured I would just have a long lie in bed and pretty much do nothing all day. Well, that was the plan. I was rudely awoken. Someone literally shook me awake. You know that feeling when someone grabs you by your shoulder to get your attention? Yeah, that. But you're asleep and you're living alone. Can you imagine how I felt waking up like that? To be honest, I kind of thought that it was an earthquake. Then I realized that nothing in the room was shaking or had fallen. I naturally looked towards the balcony. My bed faced the doors to the balcony. I always drew the curtains before going to sleep, but I noticed that one of them was half open. I started to get a little worried and I thought that there might be a break in progress. Was there a thief out there on the balcony? I got up instantly and looked around my apartment to see if anything had been taken or if anything was broken. I hurriedly looked around and found nothing out of place. To be honest, I was still half asleep. I was annoyed that I got woken up, so I wanted to get back to bed as soon as possible. I stumbled back towards my bed and got the fright of my life because there, just beyond the frosted glass of the balcony doors, was a dark hulking shadow. It was so daunting to see that I just froze in place. I was certain that shadow couldn't be cast by a neighbor or someone's laundry blowing in the wind. I realized that it really could be a thief hiding on the balcony. I didn't know what to do. I had to do something, but I felt like I was just glued to the spot. I convinced myself that I had to act. I needed to shut the window if there was someone out there. I knew that if I did that, then the window would make this noise, as I locked it. They were so squeaky I decided to bite the bullet. With a sudden burst of courage, I threw open the curtains to confront whoever was on my balcony, but there was no one out there. Why the hell did that shadow on my balcony go? I had to be sure. So I opened the doors and stepped out to make sure that no one was out there. I even looked over to the next balcony, nothing. The one above, nothing, and below, nothing. I mean, I was on the 3rd floor of an apartment block. It's not like someone could be stood outside. Even if they were outside, I bet I would have seen him leave. You know, there were no places they could exactly disappear into. It was a really weird incident. I guess I blamed it on my lack of sleep at the time. I was determined to enjoy my day off, so I went out shopping. I bumped into a female colleague that I quite liked. Since I didn't have any plans, I asked her if she wanted to get a coffee. She said, yes, it didn't seem like such a bad day off. In the end, She was sat opposite me, and she broke a comfortable period of silence by asking, "Are you okay? You know, living in that apartment. Why, what's up with it? Oh, I guess you are then. I guess you haven't heard anything." I pressed her for more information, and it turned out that someone took their life in the apartment above the one I was renting no longer than about a year ago. I was shocked to hear that, and more shocked with the further details I heard. The man who took his life was the very man I was here to replace on my second. I knew that he had been let go from the company, but I didn't know the backstory. He was under a lot of pressure at work. The boss apparently gave him a horribly tough time. His home life didn't seem much better either, as he cheated on his wife with a coworker. Once the news got out of the company, everyone at work shunned the guy and made their feelings known. Supposedly feeling like he didn't have a friend in the world, he made the ultimate sacrifice by tying a rope around his neck and plummeting from the 4th floor. His body was found dangling in front of the balcony that I now owned. I really didn't expect to hear that. I had no answer to it. This new life in this new town started to feel strange and frightening. Things were going well with my date, though she was eager to see my place. I thought, why not? I didn't exactly want to go home alone. When I came home, I saw that shadow on the balcony. Enough was enough. I wasn't buying the ghost stories. It looked like someone was out there, and I suspected it could be a sneaky neighbor. I stormed towards the balcony. I saw something that I would never forget. The darkest shadow of the face swinging. To match my rush to the balcony, I only saw it briefly, but that face appeared to belong to a middle-aged man, and it was frozen in a twisted scream. My coworker friend dropped to her knees. I looked back towards her, then straight back at the balcony window, and I saw that shadowy, horrible face beyond the window, smiled briefly, then disappear. She woke up later, and she seemed to be in a bit of a state. She didn't want to leave me alone, but I tried to insist that I'd be okay. She offered me to stay with her that night, and I was pretty happy with that idea. I didn't overstay my welcome. We were both freaked out, and we both slept with the lights on. I went back on Saturday morning, and nothing further happened that day or the next. I guess that was probably because I didn't open the curtains or the window. I moved my bed so I would no longer be facing the balcony as I slept, and I did sleep with the lights on. I had a stroke of luck. The project I was set to help out with got completed earlier than expected, so I was able to leave on the last day. I opened my curtains and looked out to the balcony, and I saw the shadow by the window. I really do wonder if it was the spirit of that man who handled it all. Was he looking for his coworker, or for his wife, or for some kind of revenge? Was he looking for his old life back? I don't know. Either way, he's looking for something. I hope his spirit doesn't linger here. I feel sorry for the next resident. This happened last June, and back in those days I was a motorcyclist. I bought my bike after I graduated and used to ride it every chance I got. I didn't even have a direction in mind. I just loved riding. I was riding one evening, and I knew that I had a day off the following day, so I felt like going kind of far. I had a good night out riding, and I decided to head home sometime after midnight. I was on my way back towards Setagaya in Tokyo. The roads were not so busy. I was taking it easy, and then all of a sudden the car in front of me stopped. It stopped at such a speed that it collided with the guardrail. I was shocked to see the accident happen right before my eyes. I had no other choice but to pull over and figure out what happened. I raced over to the driver's side window and saw the driver was female. She was visibly distressed. She couldn't stop shaking her head and was firmly clasped on the steering wheel. "Oh, this is bad," I thought to myself. I started off by asking if she was all right in as gentle a tone as I could master. I waited a few seconds, but she didn't reply to my question, and I began to panic. This was serious. I realized that I should call the police, so I did. While waiting for them, I asked several times if the woman was all right, and eventually she got out the car. She didn't look hurt, but her skin had gone very pale, almost to the point it looked blue, and was muttering something. I couldn't make out what she was saying, so I leaned my ear close to her mouth, and she kept murmuring, What have I done? I could hear the tremble in her voice, and then, as if in an answer to her own question, she said something. I ran over a child. She kept repeating those words. Her voice gathered strength and volume, and it was very hard to listen to her panicked wails. I was deeply disturbed. It was a frightening situation. Then I remembered that I was behind her and didn't see a child in the road. They were certain there was no one around. Plus it was the dead of night. I looked back and didn't see any child anywhere. I sat with the woman and tried to calm her down for a while, but occasionally I stood up and went in search of the child. She thought she'd hit with the car. There were no children in the area. A few moments later, the police arrived. I spoke with one of the two officers and he searched with me for this child. The officer asked me what happened repeatedly, and I repeatedly told him that all I saw was the lady in front swerve and hit the guardrail. I said that I didn't see anyone on the road. The officer went in about what happened, and I went with him to listen. According to the woman, she saw a young child dart out into the road ahead of her, and she heard and felt the collision. But no matter what we did, no matter where we searched, we couldn't find the child. The officer started backing towards his patrol car while talking into his radio, and the woman was looking around the road absent-mindedly, as I watched her eyes fall on the roadside mirror. You know those mirrors you sometimes see in rural areas that allow you to see oncoming traffic around the bend? They're circular and they're usually on a high pole, tall enough for the driver to see and not be distracted by. I think they're sometimes known as convex mirrors. Well, that's what she looked at the moment. She laid eyes on it and a terrible scream rose from the pit of her stomach. The officer was shocked, as was I, and we rushed over to her and noticed that she was looking at the roadside mirror. I came over to look as well. We looked into the mirror and saw a child in the road. There was no one there when we looked without the help of the mirror. When we looked into the mirror, it was there. It was strange, the strangest thing I've ever seen, and I couldn't believe my eyes. The child appeared to be about 4 or 5, wearing a kindergarten uniform. She looked like a kid that went to a good school. That child stared at us with an utterly expressionless look on her face. The police officer and I turned to look at the road almost simultaneously, and there was no child in the road. We looked back at the mirror and we could only see ourselves and the female driver sat on the side of the road. Our faces looked incredibly pale and our mouths hung open in shock. The woman that exploded into a full-blown state of panic in the ambulance that was intended for the child took the woman away instead. But before she went, she asked for my contact information, saying she might have to call me and ask me about what happened again. And the officer said that for her sake, it wouldn't be a good idea and it would be better to forget about the incident entirely. His face was as white as snow. I insisted that the officer should take my information, but there was to be no further contact from anyone I met that day. It has all left me very confused and troubled. I think about it often. What really happened that day is a mystery to me, but I believe that I had a run-in with the paranormal and that little girl's spirit still remains in the spot where she met her final moments. Thank you. This is a mysterious experience I had at my family home. Well, in the second trimester of pregnancy, I decided to spend some time in the home I grew up in. It was really nice to be back home. The house was detached and it had 3 floors, and since my sister and I moved out, it was just my parents living there at the time. My parents' bedroom was on the 2nd floor and I was staying on the top floor in a guest room. In the latter stages of my pregnancy, I had developed a hunger I hadn't known the like of before. Also, I couldn't sleep for very long. I would wake up to different pains at all hours. However, when this happened, I did my best to lie still, keep my eyes shut and try to fall back asleep. That all changed when I heard something footsteps. Where the hell was that coming from? I wandered in the dark. It sounded like someone was running back and forth. I listened carefully to try and place the sound. It sounded like it was coming from above. I had too many aches and pains to be dealing with to pay it too much mind. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside, but when I heard it consecutively for the next couple of nights, it caught my attention. I laid there in bed thinking, you again. Interesting. I was on the top floor and I was alone on that floor. Therefore there should be no one above me making noise, much less at night. I thought that I might just be misplacing the sound of my parents walking around on the floor below. I don't know. Maybe it was echoing. Somehow, the theory felt a bit off. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. Perhaps a mouse or a stray cat managed to get in. At night we were in the countryside. I was trying to find a rational explanation, because fear was starting to set in. It was footsteps. For sure. I was certain of it. I tried my best to pay it no mind. But once my brain had identified the steps, I couldn't ignore it. Then I would hear the footsteps during the day when my parents were out shopping or running errands. It really sounded like a child running around barefoot because I was home alone, and it freaked me out a bit. I decided to ask my parents about it. I planned on asking them, but then along came the baby. It wasn't a difficult birth, which I'm grateful for, but it was harder than I thought taking care of a newborn. I didn't hear the footsteps anymore, so I just kind of forgot about them. Few years passed and I headed home to a family gathering. My sister had been home for a little while and I was looking forward to seeing her. We were all in great spirits at dinner. I was helping wash the dishes after, and that's when I heard my sister talking to my mom. When I heard that, it all came back to me, so I rushed over and I interrupted them. I've heard that too. We spoke about it for a while. My mom said she first heard the footsteps about 3 years ago, before I came to stay. My mom had heard the exact thing I had. She said it sounded like a child was running back and forth barefoot. I've heard the footsteps a few more times. My mom likes to think of the spirit as something positive. You know, like someone watching over our family. My mom seems quite happy with the idea of sharing our home with the owner of those footsteps. But I really don't like that idea. I think there's something more to those footsteps. Another incident happened that night. My sister was looking for something, and she had apparently lost her son's pajama bottoms. It was weird because I saw her take out her son's sleeping clothes out of the bag and lay them on the chair for when her son was done taking a bath. Well, Elsa, we all knew that clothes cannot just disappear into thin air, so we all helped her look for them. We looked everywhere, but we couldn't find those pajamas. We thought it was weird, but we managed to get her son a spare pair of pajamas. I got up a little later the following morning. As soon as I was awake, my sister asked me to put the pajamas there. I said I didn't. I asked her where she found them. They were found in the room diagonally across from the living room. My grandfather, on my mother's side's ashes, were in that room, and the pajamas were found close by. They looked like they had been dropped near or thrown towards the urn. My sister went around and asked everyone in the house if they had put the pajamas in there, but no one said they did. Also, we checked that room when we were searching for them that night. The pajamas were dark pink, so it's not like they could have been camouflaged by anything in the room. They stood out, and it's not like we would have chose to leave them there in such a place. My mom said that she thought it was the owner of those footsteps playing with us. Since we were all speculating on how this could have happened, we couldn't rule it out a while ago. It would have been considered a joke, but the activity in the house was ramping up. Whenever I speak to my mother, I ask her if she's still hearing the footsteps, and she says that she has been. It seems like something has settled in our family home, and it doesn't sound like it's going to leave anytime soon. I just hope it stays relatively friendly, but I have a bad feeling about it. I would just like to say a huge thank you to your friend and mine, Mortis Media. If you haven't already, go check out his channel. And a big thank you to you as well for watching and listening. Please drop a comment. Let us know which story was the scariest. Please like and share and subscribe. If you haven't, what did you think? I'm thinking about doing a new intro for the channel. Maybe changing the logo. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So if you could drop them in a comment, I'd be very grateful. See you in the comments, and thanks again for watching for it.